The corrosive combination of coronavirus and capitalism is tearing through our communities to underscore the deepest divide between us, that of the haves and the have-nots. The most egregious assault lands where it always does, in the most marginalized communities among us. The poor, with multi-generational, often multiple families living together. Black and brown communities who were discarded by society long before coronavirus. Single mothers who are forced into the impossible choice between rent and food for their children. Immigrants who are deprived of any safety nets and devoid of rights. The unhoused for whom the phrase "stay at home" is cruel and absurd. The out-of-work breadwinners who can no longer provide for their families. Domestic abuse victims who are pressed to shelter in place with their abusers. The newly unemployed masses now frequenting food banks. The imprisoned, detained, or institutionalized, and the anti-stay-at-home protesters who assert, "My job is essential too." The middle and impoverished classes lack the privileges of escaping to the Hamptons, to their personal island, or to their well-stocked yachts. In many cases, they lack the luxuries of running water, the room to socially distance, paid leave when they or their family members are sick, and personal protective gear for their jobs, which, in an act of cruel irony, have now been heralded as essential. A contagion of greed infected our society long before the arrival of coronavirus. Lulled into complacency by sleek models, shiny gadgets, and digitized entertainment, we became prime targets for hungry overlords who amassed their spoils off our labor and consumption. Nursing at the teat of consumption, we became unpaid data laborers, while gaping maws scrambled to exploit our data for profit. These titans of industry filled their own pockets on the backs of their workers, fellow humans, who markets invisibilized and rendered disposable. This colossal corporate greed is what informs our democracy. Those who usurp our power leave us begging for scraps or working in unsafe conditions, and these immoral deficits have never been more evident than with 4 rounds of coronavirus stimulus packages. Profiteers advance on the imperiled masses with glee, hoarding the lion's share of the stimulus and pillaging the coffers designated for the poor. Our representatives listen to the lobbyists in D.C., where they're plied with sweet deals and lavish funds for special interests. The lobbyists work to promote the corporate agendas of those who have money and those who will do anything to protect that money. Whether Democrat or Republican, our representatives evidently and appallingly need greater incentives to look out for the common good and essential needs of the citizens. It is up to us to demand that they do. In a world cracked open by COVID-19, it's time for the masses to assert their own power. They and we matter. We are not dispensable. We are not disposable. We are not invisible. It is time now for the people to use the powers that they still have, the powers of their vote, their voice, their pen, their labor, and their consumption. Vote, write, strike, boycott together while apart, like your life and all of the lives of those you love depends on it, because it does. At the nexus of coronavirus and runaway capitalism, it is imperative that we untangle the essential rights of citizens from profit. This is a moral choice. We must imagine a better world where all are deserving of conditions that will enable us to not only survive, but thrive. The time is now for Medicare for all, for a guaranteed basic income, for housing standards that ensure shelter for all, for green jobs with livable wages, with paid sick leave, health care that's not tied to our paychecks, and where workers own the rights of production. While our citizens suffer a devastating mix of uncertainty, isolation, grief, and economic despair, the richest people on the planet are poised to determine our fate. We shelter on this globe together, and the time is ripe for demanding fundamental and lasting improvements to our social safety net. Our top-heavy society is fragile in ways that leave us increasingly vulnerable to coronavirus and future pandemics. We must build resiliency from the bottom up, collaborating with our communities and honoring the diversity therein to protect us all. We're riding a slow train of uncertainty amidst an amorphous viral threat. If quarantine teaches us anything, it brings home the truth that the health and well-being of one is intimately connected to the health and well-being of all.